It's a word we know all too well. We fight it, we fear it, we sometimes succumb to it. We can live with it for short bursts, but when it becomes perpetual, it grinds us to a halt. Stress. Jillian, what is it?
Well, there are many definitions for stress, but the one I like the best is by Dr. Tara Swart, a psychiatrist and neuroscientist. And she says, when the load on your body or mind is too much for you to bear.
I like that. Even though it's loose, I'll say, and rather subjective, what it does imply is that we actually know what we can bear, which I can tell you from my perspective has not always been the case, and that has not been my wisdom. But tell us, where does stress begin in our bodies?
Well, stress actually starts in our brain. If the brain perceives something as a threat to our survival, like jumping out of the way of an oncoming car, it signals our adrenal glands to secrete stress hormones, cortisol, of course, being one of them. They travel through our blood, they cross the blood-brain barrier, and then they bind to receptors in our brain. And when these receptors sense high levels of these hormones, they literally redirect our blood supply, as in they shut down areas not crucial to our survival. Things like digestion, reproduction, immunity, decision-making, regulating emotions, being creative, solving complex problems. These are big things. And then we go into what's called fight or flight mode, where we engage our sympathetic nervous system, which has been designed to protect us. And when the threat has subsided, stress hormones go down and everything goes back to normal.
Yeah, except I think when they don't go back down, right? When we are no longer being chased by that proverbial bear. This is also 10,000 years ago, isn't it?
Exactly. So what I've described is acute stress, which is a lot less relevant today. Chronic stress, on the other hand, has nothing to do with keeping us alive. Rather, it's wreaking havoc on our physical and our mental well-being. And we all know the stressors. There's the psychological stressors, such as work, deadlines, bills to pay, kids, divorce, death. And then there's physical stressors, such as prolonged sitting, doing too much exercise, sleep disturbances. And finally, we've got chemical stressors, tobacco, alcohol, drugs. What's important to note is that we each have different thresholds to both how we perceive stress as well as our resiliency to stress.
Each of us has felt stress and the imprint it leaves on our bodies, but I'm curious what is actually going on inside the body leading us to that state of stress.
Well, let's start with cortisol, because even though cortisol is at play with chronic stress, we actually need it for our daily survival. But if it's consistently high over the long term, then it becomes a problem. It can lead to metabolic syndrome, which is a dangerous combination of obesity, high blood sugar, and high blood pressure, which are all precursors to diabetes. Too much cortisol is also responsible for excess weight around our midsection, known as visceral fat. And even diet and exercise have a hard time addressing this. Chronic stress negatively impacts our immune system, so inflation can run rampant. Think cancer, autoimmune diseases, cardiovascular diseases, osteoporosis, heart attacks, chronic headaches, even digestive issues and infections. And then finally, chronic stress can lead to impaired decision-making, memory issues. In fact, cortisol can literally decrease the size of our hippocampus, which is our memory center. And then there's insomnia, irritability, sadness, anxiety, and of course, depression.
It's like everything. There's so many relationships and health data that we've explored through the ElleExcel series, such as inflammation as the precursor to most disease, and how stress and high cortisol are at the root of fat gain, immune function, and mental agility. I love understanding it, but of course, we all need practical tools to address stress, like the stuff we can weave into our daily lives. Any advice?
Well, we will never be able to avoid stress, but we can work on ways to both reduce the number of stressors as well as influence how they affect us. But unfortunately, it's not always easy. We have to understand that stress management can be hard. It forces us to slow down and to prioritize self-care, which is difficult or can be difficult in a culture that doesn't always value it. So first, we want to reduce the number of stressors. How to do that? Set more boundaries, such as saying no more often, limit social media and engaging in the comparison game, limit negative people and negative influences in our lives. And a big one for women especially, asking for help when we feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, and this is really that first pillar of ElleExcel, that me pillar, for good reason. Research shows that when each of us feels a level of control, balance, and self-respect, it creates that proper foundation for us to engage with that kind of outer world. It's the foundation, right? It's really a buffer as well. So we can find ways to reduce our stressors, but we also need, I would say, to embrace strategies that help increase our resilience to stress. As you pointed out, it's inevitable. But in other words, kind of figuring out better ways to manage it. And so I can tell you on a personal note, one of the best strategies for me has been and is mindfulness and meditation, a practice very near and dear to my heart, and one that helped me recover from burnout and stay level day to day. One of the many reasons I'd say that mindfulness is super effective is that it helps ground our attention to the present moment, to the now. We're not worried about running from the possible bear or ruminating about how we look doing it. It's here and now, and it's connected to this metronome of our breath, the ongoing breath, and that's super powerful.
Yes, well, of course, you mentioned breath. Breath work, it can be a game changer when it comes to reducing stress. And if you're not convinced about the power of the breath, I recommend reading James Nestor's book titled Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. It is truly fascinating and honestly not just for people like me who love this stuff. With respect to a particular breathwork practice, during the day, my go-to is still the physiological sigh that I've mentioned in the past. Doing a deep breath in through the nose, then one more breath on top of that, followed by a long extended exhale out through the mouth. Do it as many times as you need. And note that it's the exhale that gets us into the rest and relaxed state.
Keeping your breath in check is really tough. Harder than we all think. It takes a lot of practice to breathe well and deeply, and patience with yourself, as kind of like what I call our monkey brains. They're sometimes just getting the better of you, and it's no walk in the park for sure.
And yet, going for a walk in the park can do wonders for our monkey brain. The science behind the benefits of walking in nature as a form of stress reduction is huge. Blood pressure decreases, heart rate goes down. There are even certain trees that secrete chemicals which reduce the natural killer cells in our system. And not surprisingly, the greener your surroundings and the longer you are out, the better. So if there's a chance of fitting in a 1-hour walk instead of a 30-minute walk, do it. The benefits definitely build with time.
Yeah, and that I would say brings us to exercise in general and just movement. No question, a good stress buster, and we've all heard that it's good for endorphin release.
It really is important. Although at the extreme, when you're super stressed, intense exercise is not the answer. So instead, try walking, yoga, Pilates, or something less onerous to allow your body and your mind to de-stress. Another strategy, human touch, specifically a hug, has been proven to lower anxiety, cortisol, blood pressure, and enhance our immune system. And that's because hugs induce the release of oxytocin, which is the same bonding hormone that's released during breastfeeding. And if you don't have someone to give you a hug when you need it, try hugging yourself. It works. And I'm serious. Try it.
It might raise a few eyebrows in a Teams meeting, but I'm game. What about working with a professional, such as a psychologist or a therapist, or if that's not possible, just speaking with a friend or confidant? All of these are just sort of regular tools I have in my toolbox, and I feel blessed to have them. But conversation seems to be medicine.
Talking is a big one. The mere act of speaking out loud to someone and getting things off our chest is proven to decrease cortisol levels. And a side benefit, when we do talk out loud, sometimes a solution inadvertently presents itself. Lori, there's one final stress management approach that I want to touch on, and that's the field of neuroaesthetics. It's been around for a long time, but is gaining in popularity as having a big impact on mental health, as well as a number of other health benefits. It's the science of the impact of beauty through the arts, dance, music, painting, singing, anything in the creative genre. And it's not just relegated to participating in whatever creative endeavor that interests you, but there's also a benefit in watching as well, such as going to an art gallery, a concert, or a ballet.
Oh, I love that. As an artist myself, I can tell you that I feel that. It's so, so cathartic. And yet I didn't know I would say that creativity cures. That's just beautiful. What a nice win. And so when I zoom up, we'll see that wrangling, and I'll just say, and managing stress, as with most things in life, starts within us, and a connection to ourselves, and placing greater priority on the me part of the ElleExcel equation. This begins, I'd say, by first tuning inside and taking our own pulse, let's say both literally and figuratively, and feeling what you feel and honoring that feeling, getting that kind of baseline read on our breath. And from there, let's say we double down, right, on self-love and self-care, from knowing and honoring our boundaries, all the way through to sort of ring fencing the energy and positivity and not letting the negative in. And if they seek us and they come towards us, moderating them and the amount of negativity that's within and surrounded by us. Then we invoke the tactics that work for each of us. We talk it out. We work it out. We walk it out. We dance it out. We hug it out. We paint it out, sing it out, write it out, and we revel in the beauty of art and nature. And when we do, we take back, I would say, the power to proactively manage our health. We stave off heart disease, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune diseases, war horsemen, and the neurodegenerative diseases. And this makes us live longer and live better. See? No stress. Jillian, merci.